Welcome back to Inside Criminal Minds, the series that dissects the action of the Behavioral Analysis Unit. If you are new to the series, there's a playlist in the description down below to catch you up. This episode begins with a nice dinner enjoyed by a guy talking to his guest that we come to find out is tied up and gagged. To show our new unsub, we quickly cut to the BAU where Morgan is profiling Elle about a potential love interest, which, spoiler alert, goes nowhere because in an episode coming up, she goes on a singles vacation with Morgan, but not as a couple. Anyway, we do get a great scene from Reed.
We're sitting with a guy who knows that there are 800 kernels of corn on the average cob.
Arranged in 16 separate rows.
And you're calling me weird?
But Elle is still being defensive, until JJ pulls them away in order to discuss the current unsub. And this episode is interesting because, unlike most episodes, the team actually know who the unsub is, making capturing him slightly easier. Also, they know his latest victim, and while on the plane, they discuss the unsub's history, and while discussing everything, they do land and give the details of the victims to the other FBI agents. For example, how the unsub likes to drown his victims. This is where one of the agents reveal more about the relationship of the unsub and his victims, prompting Gideon to split the team up in order to cover more ground. Hotch and Elle question an old business partner of the unsub, who reveals the unsub had a wife but got divorced rather quickly. Next we then see Reed and Gideon profile the unsub's house and find plenty of disguises in order for him to blend in anywhere. Gideon then finds catalogs of uniforms and they surmise it is to gain the trust of his victims. Meanwhile, the unsub drowns his current victim and schmoozes the hotel staff to not ask many questions about the untouched room service. Then Garcia describes the unsub's rap sheet to Morgan, where we learn he likes voyeurism and he had a statutory charge, both of those contributing to his broken psyche. Next, the team reveals the profile to the other agents on the case, and the team explain that the unsub will most likely devolve and begin killing quicker and quicker. But during the profile, Hotchner gets a call about the victim that we just saw being drowned in a completely other state, prompting Elle and Morgan to go investigate. And after that news, the FBI prepare the roads in order to try to catch him, and Gideon remarking to speak with the unsub's father. Next we see Morgan and Elle at the hotel room of the recent victim and deduce the method of capturing her and revealing that this victim, unlike his previous victims, had a relationship with the unsub. Then we see the unsub pass on a potential victim as Garcia calls Hotch about the unsub's wife, which prompts them to bring her back to the office for an interview. And this is when the team realizes she too was afraid of this unsub due to him stalking her. And while this is happening, Reed and Gideon interview the father in order to gain a little bit more understanding of the unsub and his past. We also see Gideon's power of profiling, looking around and seeing that the mother isn't in any of the pictures, and this is odd for a grieving widower to not have pictures of his deceased wife. However, the dad explains this away by saying it would break his son's heart. But they do learn more about the unsub due to the fact that the statutory case was swept under the rug by the father due to the fact that they were just being kids. Yeah, right. Gideon then asks the hard question.
Mark ever have to take responsibility for anything?
Look, what do you say? That being a protective parent has turned my child into a killer?
I'm saying you're making excuses. I'm not sure it did him any favors.
Again, showing his prowess as a profiler. But next we see the unsub with his latest victim in a hotel room where he draws the bath. You know, for reasons. Anyway, back at the field office, Hodge goes over the first victim and how she was using the unsub as a way to cheat on her husband. Unfortunately, that sealed her fate in the eyes of the unsub. This makes the team believe that there is something traumatic in the unsub's past. Then Garcia chimes in, finding the unsub's car at an airport. She also finds him on the parking garage's security camera, and they find that previously skipped victim and how he found another one dressed as a pilot in order to gain respect and to dampen the fear that she had. This is where JJ holds a press conference to warn women, and in doing so, the unsub changes his appearance and tactics in order to continue the hunt. This does show how ingenious this unsub is, using the profile to his advantage. After that, the team try to figure out why he drowns. However, we then see Elle get a little payback for Morgan's profiling that morning by calling him a slob. That's when Gideon calls in order to inform them where the next victim's body is, and this is where Reed comments on the press conference, bringing up suspicions that are actually true about the unsub changing his MO. Morgan and Elle then investigate the recent murder, where they find out that the unsub is changing plates in order to evade the FBI. Morgan and Elle then explain the method he is using for the torture, and that he has to be killing and resuscitating them in order to get that drowning death he desires. Meanwhile, Garcia then reveals a hospital visit the unsub was accommodated to due to a whiplash from a car accident. This is where we learn that he was actually in the car with his mother when she died, alluding to the fact that the unsub's mother was the first victim. Afterwards, we see a grocery store and the new ruse in action as the unsub chooses his next victim. Meanwhile, Reed and Gideon question the father more about the unsub, and we get further insight of why the father isn't grieving like a typical person. And during the questioning, they ask why he distrusts women so much, and the father reveals that his mother was cheating on the father, sparking the rampage of murders. And this is why Gideon is the best profiler. He really isn't afraid to mince words and really gets into the father's psyche, with even Reed trying to understand Gideon's righteous anger towards the father, which is really top notch. Next, we see a hotel pool with the unsub attempting to drown his current victim. However, he gets caught in the act and lies in order to cover his tracks, with the manager helping the victim out. Then Hotch is on the phone with Garcia, who finds this attempted murder in another completely different state, with Gideon sharing the info gained at the father's house, cluing the team into the unsub's first victim, forcing Garcia to research everything on the initial crash. We then see the unsub kidnap another woman, with Morgan and Elle interviewing the hotel manager, confirming Reed's suspicions of him changing his MO, which is also a very nice touch. We also learn that the mother died from being drowned, and solidifies the unsub's method of killing. Coincidentally, the unsub is near the place where the mother dies, which is somewhat good news because now the team know where the unsub is going. And we see the unsub in the car and is breaking down psychologically, forcing the victim to panic and crash the car, which alerts Morgan and Elle to her location. Luckily, they get there just in time to find her. Unfortunately, the unsub doesn't go quietly, and Morgan has to shoot him, saving the victim, but killing the unsub. They even show the father one last time, grieving, closing the episode on a slightly dour note, which I don't really understand because, I mean, he did make the bed and now he has to lie in it. And this episode was okay. It did little for character development, and the little it did doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It was good to see Gideon in a more aggressive stance towards the father, showing the amount he does actually care for the victims, with him even bringing up the victims initially on the plane, showing his attachment to the victims of the unsub and trying to give the victims more power. That's it for this episode. However, if you are curious about what happens when a spy gets fired, check out my second series, Burned Notice. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.